All right. Y'all still hear me? Give me a thumbs up, Jason, if you can hear me. Boom. All right. I'm going to share my screen with you. I got a little PowerPoint that I'm going to talk on, and then I'm going to, can y'all see my screen? Sweet. All right.
Yep.
I got a small PowerPoint, and then I'm going to go to a Google Sheet that I've got that I use pretty much every day. And kind of just show you guys, and I can share that with you guys here in a little bit after we get done. So a little bit about me. I spent 2 years out of college. My college experience, I played at Arkansas Tech for a year in football, was like a safety outside linebacker type guy. Wasn't very good. I was kind of undersized, and so it didn't last very long. But also my experience there was that I learned a lot of how not to do things, specifically in the weight room. And in college is where my love for the weight room kind of grew. So while I was playing ball, I was looking at the things that we were doing, and it just didn't seem to add up. Like, it didn't seem like things were kind of meshed or put together very well. It was just like, okay, that looks good. We're going to do that and see kind of what happens. And it didn't really work out for me very well. I didn't have a very good personal experience with that because I was undersized, and I started losing weight in the off season, and I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so ended up not sticking out for football for very long, and ended up being really blessed with getting to meet a couple of guys who were some power lifters, and kind of taught me, had a more traditional or formal education and strength training. The main guy's name is Jamie McDougall. He's an athletic trainer and a strength conditioning coach. And he basically said, you're going to have to program in principles of what you want. Him and another guy named Jeff Phillips really made an imprint early on doing things the right way and having a standard and working out to that standard. My first 2 years I spent at Clarksville, which is a 5A school in Arkansas. In 2016, we were co-state champions in the weightlifting competition that the Arkansas Football Coaches Association has. It's all right. It's kind of a thing to pad the resume, but also it was a good experience for the kids. At Clarksville, we weren't this big football powerhouse, and so they hadn't had a lot of experience with winning, and so being a part of that was really cool with those kids. The next 2 years I spent at Russellville, got to be the strength conditioning coach there, as well as a junior high football coach. Had multiple 500-pound squatters, had multiple 300-pound bench pressers. So had a really good experience with kind of programming for more of a elite athlete. I only had one 500-pound squatter at Clarksville. Ended up almost having 6 at Russellville. So they kind of pushed my how do I program for a kid that's able to have that much strength. So it was a really interesting thing. And then this past year I was at Sheridan, and we had a really good football season there, had a really good coaching staff. Coach McCarthy's fired up. It was a really big blessing. It taught me a lot on organizational skills and communicating with all kinds of coaches from all different parts of our district and things like that. It was a really good experience. I'm also the Arkansas State Director for the National High School Strength Conditioning Association, which has been a huge blessing. When I first got into strength conditioning, especially in Arkansas, I thought, I am alone. There's nobody else. I didn't know anybody else, really. And so being a part of the National High School Association has really helped me feel like there has been a lot more I'm not alone out there. And it's given me a platform to kind of educate more people. I feel like with our state clinic that we put on every year, and with the family days that we're planning on hosting this next year in each region of Arkansas, it could be a really big deal. We have Coach Holmes, who's on here right now. He's our board member in the Northeast. And then John Lepo, he's our board member in Central Arkansas. Zach Griffin is in Northwest Arkansas. Jimmy Wilson, he's at Russellville. He's in the River Valley. And then Coach McBride and Coach Jolly, they are in the Southwest, and they're at Lakeside near Hot Springs. And then Coach Oxner, he is our Southeast representative. He's also the head of the Arkansas High School Powerlifting Association. So if you got any kids or if you're interested in powerlifting, get a hold of him. He's awesome. And then our advisor at large, his name's Rob Scott. He was at the University of Arkansas for several years, and then also was at Cabot for a couple of years. And he's a great guy, a great resource. And all of those guys have kind of helped me keep my sanity, but also have been great guys to shoot ideas off of, and kind of communicate. Like, anytime I talk to Price, I know I'm going to get an honest answer about what that guy's doing, and he's just going to shoot straight. Like, I don't have to worry about there being any kind of ulterior motive or any fluff to it. Like, he's just going to give me how it is. And I love that about these group of guys, and all of them are like that. So if you need to get in contact with those guys, I'd love to get you in contact with them. They're great guys. They're good resources. And I'm pretty sure they're all on Twitter. So if you just look up their names on Twitter, you should be able to find them. Currently, I'm the head football coach at Grimsley Junior High, and that is in the Bentonville School District. This will be the first year of its existence. So things are kind of crazy, learning how to, use POs and all that kind of stuff that I've never been a part of because I've never been a head coach before of the football team. So really interesting learning that side of the business and all that kind of good stuff. I also get to assist with the varsity and freshman teams as far as their strength training. But my primary focus is with our 7th and 8th graders. So the big thing, the key points that I'm going to hit with junior high and middle school training is these 4. Okay, this is kind of Coach Pearson's philosophy of junior high, middle school training. They're not small high school or college players. I can't do the same thing with these guys that college or high school coaches get to do with their kids, because they're not the same. There's huge developmental differences between a junior high athlete and a high school athlete, and then even more so with a college athlete. And you might even in middle school or junior high have, your hairy leg kid that's already hit puberty in 7th grade be 5 years ahead of, developmentally, the next kid standing 2 feet away. So you can't train them like they're high school athletes. The next thing is there's no junior high players or coaches Hall of Fame. And I love reminding people of that, because we act like a lot of times, like as coaches, like I'm going to get my name up in the junior high gym, or ESPN's going to have this junior high Hall of Fame, and I've got to win this Thursday night. And that's never going to happen. Like, no one cares what happens in junior high. They care about what happens on Friday and Tuesday nights later on down the road. Okay. Where the rubber meets the road is junior and senior year. And if I sacrifice junior and senior year for 8th grade and 7th grade, I'm doing those kids and my school a disservice, because it doesn't matter that much what happens in junior high. It matters a lot what happens in high school. So I can't sacrifice the development of those kids for a win in junior high. And that's kind of my next point that I want to talk about, is the win-loss column. For a junior high, win-losses should not be a big deal. I went ahead, didn't I? Bob Saget. Oh, no. I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. All right. It's a good thing we're not recording, right? So the win-loss column, okay? I can't sacrifice the future generation for what's happening right now. I see so many coaches worry about what's right in front of me so much that they forget the whole process around them, and, it just kind of reminds me of those Old Testament Israel kings that sacrifice their children for what they think is what's best. And they lose sight of what's best for everybody. And I don't know how many times, on my practice plan, I would see something or I would hear something and I would write it down. Don't sacrifice the future generation for the now. Don't sacrifice the future generation for now. I've probably written that down 60 times because I want it ingrained in my head not to sacrifice the kid's future for what happens right now. Even if I think right now this is what's best for that kid, I can't sacrifice what's going to happen in the future. The next thing is that in most places, and I know that this isn't always the case, but in most places, this is a 5-year process. You've got 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. And then, for football, you get that senior year in the fall. Now, if you're a baseball guy, you pretty much get 6 years if you can get them in 7th grade. Now, I know a lot of times baseball, you don't get them till 9th grade. Here at Bentonville West, this is the first year that they've had 7th and 8th grade, so they weren't getting their kids until 9th grade. And really, they were only getting them, 2 or 3 days of that 8th grade spring semester. So they were only really having about 3 years with those guys. But for the most part, it's a 5-year process. Well, if you look at that from, okay, well, I've got to have this kid from 7th grade to 8th grade. He's got to be able to do this. You're only looking at 1 year. And so when we only look at 1 year or we only look at one semester, we kind of lose our ability to say, okay, what's the big picture with this? Okay, we lose that picture of junior, senior year. When in all actuality, you got half a decade with that kid. If that kid stays in the program, and I know it's kind of a perfect world situation, but if that kid stays in the program, we've got half a decade to work with that kid. And so you do have the time to slow cook that kid. You have the time to develop that kid. You've got that time. So don't rush it to get to a landmark in May. I hear there's been so many times, I'll go into the off season and I'll walk in and the head coach we got to have 12 guys squat this number. We got to have 12 guys squat this or bench press this number by this date. What if we just don't have the dudes to do that? And I'm obviously a numbers guy. I'm a powerlifting judge. I've had X amount of guys squat 500, bench press 300. I kind of like numbers personally, but if we don't have the dudes, we don't have the dudes, if I've got a bunch of kids that can squat 350 and it looks good, but that's where they're tapped out. What do you want me to do with that? I can't push that kid to go past what he's genetically able to do. But I can make him the best version of him possible within 5 years. But I've got to have those 5 years. Don't rush 1 year and ruin the next 4. Okay, so the priorities for middle school and junior high training. The biggest deal, especially early on, is having correct mobility and stability. The thing that I absolutely hate is, hey, we got to work on our flexibility. And I just want to, as soon as I hear a coach or an administrator or a parent or anybody say that, I'm like, all right, Dalton, just take a deep breath. Don't freak out. Because flexibility to me is just the ability to stretch a muscle as far as you can. Well, that has absolutely no athletic advantage to it at all. I've seen a lot of guys run 4.4s not be able to touch their toes, and you can't tell me that guy's not a good athlete or I can't use him. So flexibility is not it, but mobility is. I need that kid to be able to move in a certain range of motion, okay? But there has to be control of force and of, mass. And so mobility and stability, and your biggest areas to really work on are probably either going to be the hips early on and then the shoulders. Now, later on, you start talking about ankles and things like that. But for the most part, we're going to be talking about hips and shoulders. Shoulders, they probably need more stability. You got a bunch of 7th graders coming in with their backs curved like this, with their shoulders in front of their chin. Well, I got to pull that kid back. I got to back muscles to where they can squeeze back and be able to move his shoulder girdle in a way that protects his shoulder. So generally, lots of pulls. I like a 1.75 or a 2-to-1 ratio pulls over pushes. And that's kind of your generic answer to that. And then the next thing, mobility, hip mobility. The big thing that we work on every single day. We work on a hinge with our 7th graders, and we work on a body weight squat. I need your feet flat on the floor. I need you to sit back. I need your knees out. And I need you to do whatever you can to get somewhere close to parallel and keep your back integrity. And what I mean by back integrity is, the key I use is pop and lock it. So we're going to pop our butt out, and we're going to lock our back in. I don't like the cue of keeping your back flat because that looks different to other people. I feel like your back flat is a bad cue because my back can be flat and I can look like complete garbage because my hips aren't in the right position. And so that's why I like pop and lock it. And we can use that later on down the road, that cue in different areas too. The next thing is movement patterns. We talked about the squat and the hinge. I go about teaching exercises in a movement pattern progression. When we talk about a squat, I just mean the act of sitting down and standing up. I'm not married to a back squat. I'm a power lifter and I love powerlifting. I love the back squat more than I love the front squat, but that doesn't mean that that's what's best for the kid that's standing in front of me. So I'm not that worried about whether or not we get to a back squat with a kid as much as I am that kid's being able to sit down and stand up with his spine in a position of integrity. The next thing, the hinge, and that includes your deadlifts, your cleans. That's kind of how I teach it, okay? Because the whole point of that, what I want is to be able to extend at the hips, the triple extension, so to speak. So that's the big deal with that. Push. I don't talk about bench press. I talk about pushes, okay, or presses. Those words are kind of synonymous with me. We have a progression with that. Pulls. I don't talk about, rows or anything like that unless it's a specific exercise. So each movement we have, we're not talking about an exercise. Don't be married to an exercise. Be married to a movement. Teach them that their body is designed to move in certain ways, and then you teach and build upon those movements with exercises. Don't build upon exercises to get certain movements. Have the movement patterns first. The next thing that we focus on is deceleration. It's really important for me that our kids know how to slow down, okay? And the reason for that is that everything else that we teach is accelerate, move fast, go fast, jump far, all that kind of stuff. We never teach kids how to slow down. And if we go back and we look at who are the best athletes in power sports, we start thinking about guys like Barry Sanders, like probably arguably one of the best running backs of all time. Everybody's like, he was so fast. Now, granted, he was fast, but the thing that he could do better than anybody else is slow down. That guy could slow down faster than everybody else could. He'll stop and everybody else just keeps running. And that's what made him great. So if we teach kids how to slow down and use their body to decelerate, they'll be a lot safer. ACL injuries, hamstring injuries, all that sort of stuff kind of goes out the window a little bit more. And they'll be able to accelerate back again and they'll become better athletes. After that, we start working on workload capacity. So that's kind of like your general physical preparedness, or GPP, if you will. I want my kids, to be in shape. I want them to have a high workload capacity. When we get these 7th and 8th graders in, I'm getting that kid off the couch for the first time in his life. Okay. I never baled hay growing up, but stacked wood, chopped wood, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I was a hillbilly in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that as a derogatory term. That was my mascot in high school. And that's kind of how we lived too. So, I was coming from a kind of active lifestyle, but at the same time, like, I understand most of the kids that I deal with, they don't have a clue what to do with a split maul. And so you have to understand, like, they have no workload capacity. They have a hard time of working. So we have to increase that, and it has to be a gradual, slow process. After we get a workload capacity, after I know that that kid's not going to pass out on me when I ask him to do a push-up, we can start building strength specifically. And we're going to work on those movement patterns and those exercises that go with those movement patterns to build strength. And then after you're able to do something one time, you do it multiple times. And so that's kind of, my definition of strength endurance. Once I bench press, say 300 pounds, well, kind of the next thing is to be able to bench press 300 pounds 2 times, maybe not necessarily, a set of 2, but 2 sets of 1. I need to be able to do that. So increase my strength endurance, because what I want my kids to be able to do is to display that strength time and time and time and time again. And then that way their capacity for work is increased, but also their ability to perform that strength capacity multiple times, which is kind of what we ask our kids to do. I need you to jump as high as possible, as many times as you need to in a game. I need you to be able to display this amount of strength to move that other guy this many times a game. So I feel like that's really important in making our kids ready to play. When I work with my athletes and I feel like I have them in a certain position, to play preseason, I'll have a strength endurance workout and I'll say, look, you hit that workout, you did that. I feel like today we could play a game because you hit that strength endurance. And it might be 14 sets of 2 at 80% on something. Well, that's not a lot of volume per set, but overall that's a lot of volume, and you displayed that strength multiple times. And that's kind of what we want. And then the last thing is power and speed. If I've built up a really good pyramid of workload capacity, they move well, they look healthy, all of those sorts of things, then all right, you can do all of these things. Now do them fast. I want you to be violent movers. I want you to be as powerful as possible so you can perform as well as possible. But notice that's the last thing. That's a priority list. So number 1, number 2, those are the 2 biggest things. If you don't have those, the rest of them, you're kind of, lost in the wind, so to speak. All right. So now we're going to go to my little Excel sheet. All right. So this, can y'all still see that? We're going to try to make that a little bigger. Okay. So this right here, when I work with 7th grade, I understand that I'm probably going to have the same problems every single year with 7th grade. So my 7th grade workouts from year to year don't really change a whole lot unless I find something that I just absolutely fall in love with. Like goblet squat a while back. Like I saw goblet squat and I said, you know what? I can almost kill a kid doing back squat and maybe even front squat if it's too early, but I can load that kid up with goblet squat and it's probably going to work out all right. And it's probably going to look better. So I'm going to get something that looks better. It's going to be better for that kid. The kid's going to have a lot more confidence in it because he's not going to feel like if I don't get this, I'm going to get buried in the ground where I stand. So things like that. So these right here, so with our 7th graders, this is what we're working on right now. The first day I have them, I'm going to do this lower A workout. Okay, so this is block 1, June. First time I ever see these little babies. They're walking in. They look like 6th graders, act like 6th graders and all that kind of stuff. We're going to start with the wall squat. Okay, and that's our number 1 movement pattern squat exercise. They've got to be able to do a wall squat. And I'm not meaning like a traditional put your back on the wall, hold the isometric, contraction at 90 degrees. I mean, they're facing the wall. Their feet are about 2 inches away from the wall, and they've got to go down parallel. And if you'll notice, a lot of them, they have a real hard time doing it because they've always fallen down to sit, and they've never actually sat down. They've never actually had to have their knees go out. They just shoot them forward. Well, that wall being there prevents them from doing that. And so the only place that their knees can go are out, which is what I want. So it teaches them how to sit back, get out, get their thighs out of the way so their belly has somewhere to go to sit down, all that kind of good stuff. Teaches them that squat cue of sit down between your feet. The next thing is I'm probably always going to program in some sort of trunk flexion when sorry, I got to add somebody in real quick. When I do a leg lift. And the reason for that is if my back is always in extension, those muscles are going to tighten up. And those kids are like, man, my back hurts. This hurts my back. And that's the last thing I want these kids to think is squat and deadlift make my back hurt, because that's red flags. And you get, to kind of use the term of one of my buddies, the crazy Karens, the moms come out. Why are you making my baby deadlift? Why are you making my baby squat? Well, I'm trying to make sure your baby is safe. And so what I teach is, if we got that flexion in there, it actively recovers their back. It stretches their back out. So they feel a lot better while they squat, while they deadlift. Now, later on, if I feel like, hey, they don't necessarily need that, but they know they can do that, then I may not program that in as much. But especially early on, I want those little babies to know that, hey, if I flex my back, it's going to stretch out. And it's going to make my back feel better while I deadlift and I squat. Sometimes, I'll put in a broad jump just to see how they land, see how they jump, what kind of athletic background they have. I'm not married to having 3 exercises this early on. Generally 2 is the max because they have a hard time focusing and they can't remember a whole lot. So 2 is your max. The next thing is a wall hinge. So basically we turn them around and we tell them to reach their butt back to touch the wall. And then, and we'll start them out 2 inches away. And then I'll say, hey, if your butt touched the wall, keep scooting. If they take another 2 inches, and if we tell them to reach, they put their butt to the wall. If they still touched it and they stay popped and locked, keep good back integrity, then we'll move them out a little bit more. And our goal is to get them parallel to the ground with popped and locked posture with their lower back. And if they can do that, they can pretty much do whatever we're going to ask them to do with a hinge or with a squat or with a bent over row or anything like that, as long as they can keep that position. Now, a lot of times that's going to give me a general idea of the group as far as their hip mobility and their posterior chain workload capacity, because if they can't get in that hinged position, with their back popped and locked like that, that's where I know we have to focus. And generally that's going to be your problem in 7th grade, is that posterior chain has never been worked before. Absolutely not. Okay. And then the last one is a perfect push-up. Okay. Now I say a perfect push-up because the way I teach it, everybody can do a push-up, but not everybody does a push-up the same way. And I've done this 2 different ways. I've either done push-ups from the knees, or I've done push-ups from an incline. So either on a bench or a rack bar catch. And generally what I'm looking for is I want our hands just outside our chest and our elbows tight. I don't want elbows way out here. I don't want hands above our eyes. Our hands need to be right here, straight across our chest. Okay. And I want their elbows to be tight, because I know if our elbows are tight on their way down, our focus is not just to go down, but to squeeze our shoulder blades together, to teach them how to squeeze that shoulder girdle. And a lot of times I'll put my hand right in the middle of their back and I'll say, squeeze my hand with your shoulder blades. And they've never been asked to do that before. And a lot of them have a hard time trying to figure out, because they've never been asked to move their shoulders. A lot of times they'll shrug up. And I'm like, nope, that's not what I want. I want back and down. And so that cue teaches them, hey, this is where I've got to squeeze. So if I squeeze back, put my hand right in the middle of their shoulder blade, they'll kind of learn, I'll give them that tactile feel of, hey, that's where I'm trying to go. So that's the big focus with the perfect push-up. And then, the next week, we'll go to a standard push-up, off the floor, but the process never changes. And then we teach it that way. If you can do a wall squat, you can do a wall hinge, you can do a perfect push-up, then theoretically you ought to be able to squat. you ought to be able to deadlift. You ought to be able to do bench because the process is the same. And that's how we try to build off of that movement pattern instead of being married to an exercise and try to get to there. We focus on teaching the cues the same way. I'm going to give that kid the same cues on a wall squat that I'm going to give him when he's a senior doing back squat or overhead squat, So, and then also with the push up, we do either a dumbbell single arm row, which is kind of our elementary pull movement. And the reason I do that is so I can get them to focus on just one arm at the same time, and they can focus their nervous system on just figuring out that one arm, and then they'll switch it. And then later on, we'll do both. Right now, my 7th and 8th graders right now are learning that. And we just use 10-pound plates. Some of them use 5 because some of them are still, little babies. And so they need 5 to be able to hold that posture with a bent over row. We'll just use 5 pounds. And I'm not worried about them moving up in weight. And I tell them that. I don't care if you have a 10-pound or a 5-pound plate in your hand. I just want it to look good. I want you to focus on moving the right way. And you have to preach that to them because, daddy at home is wondering, hey, when are y'all going to bench press? When are you guys going to do squat? And they're worried about the numbers. You have to preach to them how important it is to focus on the movement pattern. Then later on, we start doing what I call plate press or floor press with the plate. We start them off on the floor because it's a limited range of motion, and we can really teach, that pop and lock posture on a bench press and squeezing their shoulder blades together. And we teach that push and pull motion is the same thing, except it's just in reverse. So this, on the way down with a push, we're going to squeeze our shoulder blades together, keep our elbows tight, and then we're going to push up. Well, on a pull, we pull with our shoulder blades first and then our elbows. And so it's the same motion, it's just in reverse. So we really focus on that. So we go from using a plate on the floor to using a plate on the bench press, and we really hammer their posture on the bench press. Pop and lock their back, squeeze their shoulder blades together, hips nice and tight so their butt doesn't come off the bench. I teach feet flat on the floor. That way they push with their heels and not their toes. Because I've realized that if they push with their toes, their hips are going to come up, and I want them to try to push up the bench, not up vertically. And really teaching early on, helping those kids figure out leg drive is going to be really important. And just maintaining the posture. And so we're going to stay right here with floor press and plate press for about 2 or 3 weeks. We're just now, this is week 4 of our program with these kids, and the 8th graders are just now getting the close grip bench press, which is kind of the next progression there. And then, so throughout July, we'll start doing some rear elevated goblet squats and things like that, and kind of move along with that progression. We start doing Romanian deadlifts with the bar with our 8th graders, but with our 7th graders, I'm not really worried about moving along that fast. And so we're going through these blocks really, really slow. And if I feel like a group isn't progressing very quickly, then we'll just stay there, like if in August, we're starting football and stuff. So if I feel like their work capacity isn't to a point to where they can learn new things in the weight room and keep up with all the football information and starting back with school and all of those sorts of things, we'll just stay right here instead of moving on to things like, regular grip bench press for our 8th graders and things like that. So we won't do a lot of teaching, in October, November. If I feel like our guys don't look good in the goblet squat, because they've been focusing so much on football, we won't go to a front squat. We'll stay there at a goblet squat until it starts looking good again. And so that's kind of the big deal with those guys. This is our progressions. Okay. Like I said, we teach movement patterns. So we have vertical push, vertical pull, horizontal push, horizontal pull, Then we have a squat, we have a hinge, we have our core or ab workouts, or however you want to word that. And then we've got some areas of particular areas of concern is what I like to call them. So ankles, groin, hamstring, glutes, things that we do with our dumbbells and bands, shoulders, things like that. With our 7th grade, they're in what I call our phase 0 and phase 1 blocks, and they're going to stay there. Like even down the road, you know, if everything looks good, I'm gonna want to keep them in that phase 0, phase 1 until I know for sure they're ready to move on. And these are, you know, our elementary priority exercises. I'm going to teach these lifts in this order as I program them. And our athletic blocks, like I was showing you earlier, they're in that order. They're programmed to where my kids aren't going to do a dumbbell Romanian deadlift until they could do a wall hinge and it looks good. They're not going to do a barbell Romanian deadlift until the dumbbell Romanian deadlift looks good, and things like that. Now, a lot of people, your progressions are going to be dictated by what you have in your facility. So right now, we don't have a lot of dumbbells, so we just use plates. Okay, so we just use a plate Romanian deadlift. That's fine. The movement is what's important, not necessarily what we call it. So this is what we use for 7th grade. In 8th grade, they're going to learn a little bit more. You know, it's a progressive thing. In 8th grade, you know, they're going to be developed a little bit more, and they're going to go into phase 2. Phase 2 is where they're going to pretty much stay until the end of 9th grade, where we start doing more Olympic lifts and things like that. And even the high school guys, the varsity guys that I'll program for, they are going to live in phase 2. Phase 3 is kind of like a unicorn land. If I have a group that lives in phase 3, we did an unbelievable job. And to be honest, they're probably just really good athletes. Phase 2 is where we're going to live. And here's why. I'm going to not have a lot of athletes that are going to be capable of an athletic ability to make an Olympic lift look good, and get a lot out of it. You know, I don't feel like sacrificing strength and force development for the ability to have a power clean look good with 10-pound plates on each side, because that guy's not generating a lot of force with just 65 pounds. I can have him generate a lot more force with 100 pounds if I'm doing a deadlift. Okay. And that's what I'm saying. Be married to the body movement pattern. Don't be married to the exercise. If you're going to get more out of the kid doing a deadlift, do a deadlift. Don't do a power clean. Okay. You know, so that's a really big thing for me. And if a power clean doesn't look good, but you know, what I call a power deadlift or power high pull is what some people will call it. Just do that. If they're getting triple extension with that, that's what we're wanting. So why make them catch it if the catch looks terrible, but the high pull looks good and they're getting triple extension off of that? That's kind of what we're wanting out of it. So with 8th grade, I'm not going to do anything with those guys with 8th grade like that. We're going to strictly work on strength, and we're going to work on strength endurance and increasing that workload capacity. And we'll get our power through plyometrics, whether that be upper body plyometrics or lower body plyometrics with jumping and landing. And I'll coach the landing 10 times more than I'll coach the jumping, because the jumping part comes easy to kids. It's the landing part that looks like garbage. And then I'll just show you guys the 9th grade varsity phases. That's what it'll look like. Right here is what we're going to do in the weight room for the rest of forever with the high school guys, unless I just love something that comes up. These got hyperlinks. When I share this with you guys, it'll have hyperlinks to some YouTube videos showing you what I mean by all of these exercises. So feel free to get that. And then there's just some miscellaneous section that don't necessarily fit in any of those body movement patterns, but they kind of have a place here and there. So like box push-ups, that would be like your incline push-ups that we do. There's some different ab exercises that if your kids like them, they can do them, and things like that. This is also where like your bis and tris and stuff fit, like that. We got Arnold presses with our vertical push. It's just variations of different things. Then we have like our field days where we're flipping tires and things like that. I'll do that a lot with the 7th and 8th graders when we get into a facility that allows us to do that. A tire flip with an appropriately sized tire with the 7th grader and 8th grader is a really good thing. I feel like, because that's something that they can kind of figure out how to do when they're not with us, but also, it's a, I don't know if functional is the right word, but it's a little bit more fun. You can have more fun with kids flipping tires and, throwing med balls and pushing sleds, and you can just, all right, here we go, bench press, up, down, one, all those sorts of things. I like getting really creative with the sleds. I like a high bar push. Not real crazy about a low bar push on a sled or a prowler, just because back integrity is questionable at times. I really love, your kind of west side marching with those guys, forwards, backwards, sideways, any kind of direction you can get with those guys, I think is great. It loads that posterior chain, increases workload capacity, all that kind of stuff. You can also get a pretty good upper body workout with a prowler. If you're pulling it, you can pull with one arm, pull with two arms. I've also seen people bear crawl pulling the sled, which I thought was pretty creative. Kind of reminded me of my days of pulling trucks and cars and stuff at the gym I worked at. We also like strongman carries, where they're holding a plate just on their chest and they're just walking from point A to point B, or farmer's carries or suitcase carries. I think those are really, really important in increasing workload capacity and things like that. Change of direction, have some change of direction things that you could do there. Creativity, as far as like 5-10-5 variations, I've always been a big fan of those. Certain coaches like agility bags, going up and down the bags with agility, any kind of 4-cone variation, your traditional cone box, 4-man weave, ladder drills. Not super big fan of ladder drills. Now, don't, email me like saying I'm a terrible coach because I don't like ladder drills. But I want kids to displace space. I want kids to be able to move from point A to point B, and there's just not a lot of movement there. It does teach kids how to move their feet fast, but I want them to move their feet fast from point A to point B. So I would say limit the ladder drills if you can. But the best thing that I've found, and I have a hard time imagining I'm going to find anything better, is the grid that we've talked about. I think a couple of weeks ago, Kyle Keese talked about the grid. I love it. I think that's probably one of the best things I've seen in my career. I wish I'd come up with it. If I'd come up with that, I'd have marketed that bad boy and hopefully wouldn't have still be working for a public school somewhere. Hopefully somebody had been paying me a lot of money because I think it's that good. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So that's what we do on our field days. I've also got some grid stuff that we'll work on. Kyle talks about having a linear day, a lateral day, and a mixed day when he talks about the grid. So these are the things that we did with that, which I thought were really good. Kind of hard to do the partner stuff right now with the guidelines that we have, but the in the lane type of stuff, coming to balance on a cone, teaching kids how to decelerate, teaching kids how to move through space is really, really good. Figuring out their body, how to rip their elbow, how to open their hips. The grid makes that super easy, especially when you're coaching kids who aren't very good athletes. Your top 5%, they'll figure it out on their own, but everybody else, you're going to have to teach them. And so the grid allows you to see a lot of kids and how their movement works very specifically, very easily. Here's our Feed the Beast section. So this is kind of our recovery stuff, our recovery modalities, and then we'll hit certain, as needed areas or our areas of concern. And this is just kind of like a weekly schedule of what we'll do. And we'll kind of prioritize certain guys and put them in groups. So if a guy has upper body, this UID, that stands for upper body iron deficiency. So if I got a guy that's puny upper body, This is what he's going to do on Tuesday afternoon after the regular workout. That guy's going to go over there and he's going to pump out, try to get some extra volume in. If I got a lower body iron deficiency guy, he's going to hit this right here, and it's going to be really heavy posterior chain, dominant type stuff. And I will hit some, anterior stuff, with goblet squats and things like that. I don't want that to be super intense with my guys, because it's more important in this area to have the volume instead of the intensity. So it's really, really important for me right there. If I've got some sort of shoulder stability issue, I'm going to have these guys do this. And that also has hyperlinks to what we call the banded shoulder circuit, which was face pulls, straight arm lat pull downs, single arm rows with the band. I'm a big fan of the bands, especially teaching, the shoulder girdle movements and things like that. If I've got a cat that has lower body issues with mobility, we'll hit them up on Tuesday, things like that. Groin, I love duck walks. I feel like if you can walk when you're low, your hip mobility is going to be really good. It also helps with ankle mobility. Guys look a lot better after a while. Those first few times you do the duck walks forwards, backwards, sideways, it looks like complete garbage. But you give them a couple of weeks, they'll start figuring it out, and their mobility starts to increase a little bit. Another thing this has is our charts that we'll use. Let's see if I can make this a little smaller so we can see the whole chart. All right, so, we have certain rep ranges where we'll use sixes. It also has the warm-up sets over here. So we'll print these off. We'll put them on the racks. Say, all right, we're working sixes today. You got your warm-up sets over there. And then you also have, one set at light, one set at medium, and then two sets of heavy sixes. And so one set light, one set medium, two sets of heavy. That gives them their specific weight. That way they don't have to go and figure out, 50% of this is that and all that kind of stuff. They can just look at this chart, find their max, find their weight. It's easy, simple. The less they have to think and do, the absolute better, and the more time that we can actually have to actually put stuff up, pick stuff up, put it down. We got 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, a little bit heavier percentage on 2s, and then we got a high volume with reps of 12, 10, and 8. And then we got, if we have dynamic movements, we'll use these. And then we also have some A-pre stuff that we've used in the past. And then if I want to work heavy singles, I'll use what I call the pyramid. And it has the warm-up over there, but we don't use that. It kind of has a warm-up built in with a set of 8, and then a set of 5, 3, and then 3 singles, and then a drop-down set of 5. I really like this. If I want to train heavy singles, this is my go-to. I'm not training heavy singles a lot with 7th and 8th graders. 9th graders will start dabbling a little bit, and then 10th, 11th, 12th, they should be pretty good at their body pattern movements and being confident and being strong in what they do. So we'll start hitting 1 reps a lot more. Now the modified A-pre is what we've really started going to, especially coming back from the break with the virus and stuff. This has allowed us to really have our kids get met where they're at, instead of having to, kind of estimate and guess or max them out, which is a really bad idea after a 4-month off break, to see where they're at. So this has allowed us to, hey, get a general idea of where you're at and then modify per set. So, their first set, if we're using this modified A-pre force chart, if I've got a max of 200, I'm going to do 90 pounds for a set of 2. And that's, they're 50% or whatever. 2 reps, not that bad. Okay. So then we'll go up to 75%, which is 130. We'll do that for 2. If that starts to look kind of bad, I'm going to keep an eye on that kid for this next set. And then I'm going to shoot for 6 reps on their 3rd set. And then at their top, okay, their 3rd set, if they get 6 reps, they can add 10 pounds. If they get 5 reps only, then add only 5 pounds. If they got 4 reps, they're not going to add any pounds. And if they did 3 reps, they're going to take 5 pounds off. 2 reps, they're going to take 10 pounds off. and then their 4 set, they're going to do it. They're going to aim for no more than 4 reps. If they get those reps, then they'll go up. Okay. But nobody's going to do more than 5 reps or 5 sets. And so that's really, really important, is that you teach them, hey, you got to take this set seriously, or it's going to limit the amount of sets that you can do. So we'll do that modified A-pre at 4s. We'll do it at 6s. And then I think I have an 8 somewhere. Let me see if it's, yeah, there it is. Boom. There's the 8. Whoops. And so it's a really neat tool. And I also think that it's a really good tool because I can use this for goblet squat. I can use this for dumbbell bench press, and things like that. And that'll allow me to where I can start kind of getting more of a percentage on those younger kids with those kind of auxiliary lifts that we haven't quite gotten to, like a core lift, so to speak, like a barbell bench press, barbell squat, power clean, things like that. That's pretty much it. Other than, everybody's got these calendars, 8th grade, 7th grade. Those are kind of the block calendars that I have. I really like looking at this when I program for guys, and I'll look at the school district calendar to figure out when they're having breaks, when they're having, PD days where the kids aren't at school. That way I don't have a surprise of like, oh, we missed the workout, and I didn't know, so that kid's going to miss out on this, whatever. I should go ahead and already know that. So it's really important to know what's going on. When I send this out, so this right here was the 7th grade athletic development blocks. Those go from June to July of that first year. And then the 8th grade has their own calendar, and the 8th grade has their own athletic development blocks. And that goes from June to July, and then their 9th grade year. Now 9th grade, I start getting a little bit more specific, and that's going to change kind of with group to group, wherever they're at the end of their 8th grade year. And so I don't just go ahead and just program like, hey, that's what that kid's going to do in 9th grade. But the first 2 years, I'll go ahead and do that, because generally 7th and 8th grade, you're going to have your general problems. And then after that, certain groups will have their specific things. Certain players will have their specific things, and you'll end up programming for those specific things. So do you guys have any questions about any of that? I know it's kind of all at the same time. Feel free to like unmute and we can just talk. You don't have to put it in the chat.
Man, I don't have questions. That was good stuff. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Man, you're talking about like jump landing mechanics, with the young kids. Shoot, we're doing that crap with the varsity, guys. Like every Tuesday, Thursday, part of their warm up, we're jump landing. We're working snap downs. So I think it's one of those deals. It's like, although they're varsity athletes, they're still 16, 15 to 17 years old. So it's just one of those things that, you're working with 7th grade, and you keep on doing it. I think that's awesome. It's good stuff. You're starting on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to go back and work on those things with those kids. These exercises, they start out as kind of the core lifts for 7th and 8th grade, but later on, those become supplementary lifts to those big time core lifts like squat, bench press, power clean, conventional deadlift, things like that. And so, you're always kind of reinforcing those learning cues time and time again. So even the varsity guys need to hear all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I really like how you have, everything set up. It's really got me thinking, we don't get our 7th grade until they actually start in the school year. We don't get them the summer before. And I'm looking, it's going to be different for me. It's going to be different for our school. We're going to the year-round schedule. So like the 6-week on, 2-week off from July 27th to June 15th or something. So that's going to be really interesting. I mean, obviously we don't know if we're going to start July, this year, but that's the goal, I guess, as far as what they want to do, academically, it sounds like a great idea, but, you know, for your fall sports, it's like, okay, well, you still got to get them to practice, but
Yeah.
we still got to run buses, but everybody's going to have to practice at the same time. So that's going to cause like a little bit of a stretch, but you've given me a lot of ideas as far as programming for them once they get here, and, you know, kind of how to progress that year to year. And also like the GPP stuff, can't talk big enough about it with those young kids. Cause like you said, they don't know how to work, have never worked. So that I really like that.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you guys are going to a full year round schedule. I'm going to have to call you and talk to you about that. I honestly think that might be a huge advantage because, you know, there's a lot of times where, you know, kids will just disappear for 3 months out of the summer. You don't see them again. But if they got to come back to school, like, you're going to be here. I think that might be a pretty big advantage down the road.
Yeah, I mean, we're I guess a lot of the coaches are apprehensive about it, but supposedly, you know, the people that they talk to that kind of convinced us to go to the schedule say athletically and academically they like it. You know, it's just, I think more it's going to be a struggle for like the junior high kids just because they won't be able to drive themselves. You know, like they're going to really depend on all that kind of stuff. So, and we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, you know, we don't know where any of this stuff is going. It seems like every time that we get, you know, one step forward and then 2 steps back, more and more cases now that more places are opened up and everything. So it'll be interesting to see that over the next month, because our superintendent and AD and everything, they're supposed to meet next week. We haven't done any junior high lifts so far this summer, just the high school. And they were thinking about, you know, in July, do we bring the junior high in? But, you know, we'll see. It's all up in the air right now.
Gotcha. Awesome. I think it could be good, man. I would be really excited about that. I think that's probably where things are going to end up eventually down the road anyways, but I think that'll be a really good deal. Quick thanks. I'm going to talk some thank yous real quick. The first one, my wife, I don't know if y'all heard her earlier. She was in there banging the weights around a little bit. I think she was probably doing deadlift. I'm not sure, but she's awesome. That lady, she deserves all the praise in the world. Coaches' wives are unbelievable. And she's probably moved us twice now in the last year, almost by herself because I've been off chasing the dream. She's absolutely wonderful. Takes care of us, deals with a lot of stuff, and deals with me in a grumpy mood a lot of the times. And so I just want to give her a little bit of a shout out. She's awesome. The Arkansas Advisory Board, I talked about them a little bit at the beginning. Those guys are great. Please reach out to them. Ask them questions. They're great guys. Things like that. And then the coaches and athletes that I've worked with in the past and schools that I've been at, it's been a really good learning experience at every place that I've been. And that's probably the biggest thing is I've always learned something. That's really good. The National High School Strength Conditioning Association, man, that thing it's really been important to me to kind of learn from that. It's put me in contact with a lot of people, guys like Monty Sparkman and Micah Hertz. Those guys have helped me out tremendously, especially with this kind of stuff. I've probably bugged Coach Micah a lot, probably too much. But he's really great with middle school. His program where he's at, they go all the way down to fourth and third grade, which I think is awesome. I would love to be at a place long enough to where we start pouring into those little fourth graders and third graders' lives. So he's really, really good at, you know, working with people and getting them to buy into what they're doing there at his school. And then Rob Scott, he's a great buddy of mine. He's an absolutely phenomenal strength coach. Oh goodness. There we go. If you don't have my contact info already, I'm sure most of you already do. I'm on Twitter at Pearson Strength, and then my email address is right there. I always like talking about books a little bit. I'm a big reader when I have the time. Probably the biggest book that's kind of impacted on how I think about training and developing athletes this past year is called Fourth and Goal Every Day by Phil Savage. He worked with Nick Saban and Bill Belichick at the Browns, and then he's worked for both of them in different parts of his career. But he talks about what they look for in athletes and how they expect certain athletes to be. They all look certain ways. And so it didn't necessarily transfer over. Like I said, I can't make a seventh grader do what a college kid is, but it changed my mindset on, okay, I got to know what the ideal guy looks like. And I've got to take whatever walks in the door and get him as close to that ideal guy as possible. So that was a really good book. And then Breaking Free by Beth Moore. That's a Bible study that my wife and I are doing together. It's a life-changing experience going through this Bible study with her. Beth Moore's got a lot of other Bible studies, but that one's the one that we're doing, and it's absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely encourage you to go through that Bible study with your wife. It's really, really life-changing. And then the last book, it's called The Secret Blend by Stan Toller. That was a book my dad gave me a couple years ago. And it's about this guy who ends up starting to drink coffee at this little shop in the town that he lives in, and the relationship that he builds with the owner and how it changes his life. I'm not going to spoil it for you a whole lot, but it's a really good book talking about building relationships and connections with people and things like that. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with is a quote by a man. It's kind of changed my life within the past year or so. His name's Larry McBroom. I got to coach with him at Sheridan. He was the defense coordinator while I was there. He's now the head coach down there. He's an absolutely legendary coach from Oklahoma and Texas that Chasen and I were blessed to work with. He is an older guy, and I asked him, what's something I'm not going to know until I'm older, but that I need to know as a younger coach right now? And he said, hey, quit worrying about the things that you have no control over, because all you're going to do is just spin your wheels, and it's not going to help you out at all. And he said, just let God take care of the rest and go home. Like, you are needed at home. Your kids need you. Your wife needs you. Things like that. Like, that's what's important, And Coach McBroom, and he probably learned it the hard way, and that's why he can say that. But when it's time to go home, he goes home and he plays with his grandkids and spends time at home and pours into the people in his life. And so that's kind of going to be my farewell on this recording. So I'd like to stay on here and talk about kind of like what's going on in y'all's life as far as y'all training your kids with the guidelines and stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and sharing my screen right now. So thanks for coming, guys. I was afraid I was only going to be talking to like one or two people, and you guys kind of stuck it out. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man, no problem. Hey, Bryce, this is for you real quick, though.
Oh, gross. I really hope that's not the picture that pops up on this recording on YouTube. That would be disgusting.